Formaffinity,
where design takes form.
Hey guys, welcome to another Formaffinity video. In today's video I'm going to take you through the process of creating these Pebble speakers using essentially 3 different techniques. So we will begin by using Blender to create our line work. We will use the Nurbs curves and Nurbs sphere to create these, and I will show you step by step how I go about it. And then carry that over to a print in which we will use as an underlay for creating a sort of old school VisCom drawing using pastels, markers, and pens and ink. Once we create that beautiful rendering, we will take it over into Photoshop or Affinity Photo and do our basic color edits and levels adjustments and cleanup work. So this is a 3-part video series. If that's something you're interested in, be sure to stay tuned. Okay, let's get started with the Nurbs modeling. I'm going to go ahead and delete that default cube and bring in the image. So when creating this, I am looking at just the edges or line work that's necessary for capturing the form. So to assist in that, since these Pebble speakers are essentially a sphere that's been cut, we'll go ahead and start with a sphere. Let's create a Nurbs sphere. Okay, so with that created, hitting N, I'm going to open up the side panel here and just raise this Z to 1. So that will bring us to the floor. Go into Nurbs. I'm just going to create a Nurbs circle. Raise that up. It's created with the exact same circumference as the sphere. So if we go into hitting spacebar, I'm going to go into the front orthographic, ortho, and in the outliner I'm going to just hide the camera for now. And you can see we can place this right at the center of the sphere. We can also turn on snapping right here and snap to increment. And I've got move, so it's going to affect the move. So that snaps it to the middle. Go out of ortho, back into perspective, turn snapping off, and then go into rotate. I'll go ahead and turn on my transforms. When I look at this, there's kind of a cut line in here. Let's see if we can show you. So this cut line here, we're going to want in our finished drawing. So, and I believe that's basically close to the center line of the sphere. So with this at the middle, we can just rotate 45. So I typed in 45 on rotation X. And you can see where we're facing. We've got Y going this way on the green line and X in red going this way. So somewhere in that operation our Z height for that guy is off a little bit. Set it to 1. Okay. So next we need to create this wedge here. So I'm going to just copy and paste another one of these. Rather than move it straight up like this, I'm going to come into global at the top here and set to normal, and we'll move it straight out from there. So we want to get into a position that's allows enough space from our cut line to here, and yet we still have a nice chunk out, taken out of the circle or the sphere. So I would say if I come into the right view, ortho, having something for you guys to line up on, here's these little corners on the graph. So we'll just go to right about there. Right there. Okay. Back out into perspective. And so now it's just a matter of scaling this till it's just visible over the sphere. Now I've got a few collections going on. I like to just grab my point light and put that into the camera collection. So these will be, this collection will be our Nurbs, and the Nurbs sphere of course is here. That will not be rendered unless we need it, and so now we can just toggle it on and off. You can kind of see what we have so far. So next will be, if I expand this, you'll see there's an edge here and then another little edge here. So we just want to create basically 3 circles. And then this one here will be not at the center, because as you can see there's more space from here to here than there is from there to there. And this image is a little deceptive, but as you can see this goes down from here and this goes down as well. You just can't really tell. So this whole inner portion here is set downwards from the outside, so it goes down. So let's turn off the outer sphere there. We're going to copy and paste this guy. And that should be one of those. It will be something like that. So you can see my scale here, about 0.8. So we'll just set it to 0.8 on all of those guys. And then once again we'll just copy, paste, and very easily scale this down. And this one will need to be eyeballed. So I'm going to get my model sort of in place here. So still on transform orientation set to normal. I'm going to move this up. You know, we need room for a button or the knob, a little light, some text. There's space here. So right now I'm at 0.46 on that. Okay, so now before we inset that, I want to create some of these other circles on this inner speaker part. So I'm going to once again copy this and scale it down. So there's sort of a curved edge here which goes down, and there's a little bit of a wall in there that we could capture. Okay, so something like that, and then I'm going to copy and paste, create that little wall by just bringing this straight down. And then it is just a matter of creating a few of these lines. So I want one sort of here, and this will be the innermost edge. And then what I like to do is give just a ring for the top as a reference point. So copy this once again, scale it to about the middle, and then just bring it up. So as you can tell, we've got kind of a lot going on there, but if you look at it at certain angles, you can see the form happening. I do want to make this slightly smaller. Which means that one as well. Okay, and now we can take all of those. Since it's still on that plane, we need to inset it. And this is just sort of a visual guessing game, so to speak. But we will bring this down. Let me go into right ortho. Maybe something like that. So I'm here with all those guys. So as you can see, curves down, curves down. That looks pretty good. So next we're going to try to capture this volume knob. So I'm just going to take that circle, Control, paste, copy, and scale it way down, something like that, so you can see, and then just move it down. So that's still a little bit too big. If we scale it down a bit more. And I essentially want it to be in between these two lines evenly. So something like that. And then just copy, paste, move up, and then copy and paste again, move up a little bit, and scale that one in. So this is going to be, let me grab it correctly here, that knob, and you can kind of see the curvature happening there at the top. There's also sort of this little inset dimple, but that's easy enough to just capture in the drawing. The other thing is there is a little bit of a hole. As you can see, that edge is different than this. So I will go ahead and create something for that by copying that. Just moving it out slightly with our scale. Okay, so as you can tell, and if we go into right orthographic, just the base of the sphere touches the floor. So now we need to go ahead and move everything that we have so far down. So all these guys and the Nurbs sphere should go down to sort of meet this edge. When we do that, I'm going to set this to global. Okay. Okay, so that's where we're at there. And we can turn off the Nurbs sphere and get an idea of what that looks like. Okay, so next there is a slight mistake here. This outer edge should be in line with this surface, whereas right now it is not. It's aligned with that those outer rings there. Because if we look here, this side of the knob is longer than this side, and this outer ring here is part of this surface, and as we know, that surface is going down. So to do that, we can come in here. Actually, let's create or show our 3D cursor. So right now, this is rotating at the center because the origin is at the center of that object, and we don't want that. We want the origin to be down here so that it rotates from that point. So we're going to use the 3D cursor to do that. So if I come into right orthographic and come into view on our right side tab there, I can change the location of the 3D cursor with these guys just manually. Set that one back to 0. Let's start with the height, something like that, and then move it out. I know it's going to be around here somewhere. Okay, so we're close. We need to come down a little bit, so let's say 0.75. Pretty close there. 8.75. Okay, so that's pretty close. That's close enough. So with that circle selected, we'll go to Object, Set Origin. You'll notice once again the origin right now is in the center, and once we do this operation, it's going to move it down to the 3D cursor. So Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D cursor. Okay, so now it's down there. We can turn our 3D cursor off. And now I want to go ahead and rotate that. I'm going to go ahead, just in case, set this to normal. There we go. So you can see it's all in alignment of the normal. And then just rotate it down a little bit until it matches better with that plane. And you can hold down Shift while you do this to get like sort of a gentle amount of movement. The other thing is it should go down from here, so we'll just move it down altogether. But since we changed the rotation on that, might have to move it up as well, just a hair. Okay, so that should be more realistic as to what that edge is doing. You can see it's following that surface a lot better. Alright, now what I like to do is create just a visual reference for where this speaker is if we were to use ellipse guides in the future. You could also do it for the knob as well. Pretty much anything that you'd like, but let's do it for this speaker. I'm going to copy that circle, and you can see when I turn on my move tool, the normal is going to be where that blue arrow is because I'm on normal transform orientation. So if I go into scaling, I'm going to scale this way down. Okay, so now that we have that, we need to essentially create an extrusion out of that, so to speak. So we're going to copy, Control-C, Control-V, and paste, and then just take that new one, bring it way out here. And then I'm just going to select both of them and join. Okay, so that's now one object. I'm going to isolate that selection. Now if we go into edge, select all edges and make segment, we have a segment there. Okay, and I'm going to go out of isolate select, and you can see that's just a line there now. And we can, of course, scale it. It looks like it needs to scale down a bit. And then up some more. I want it to be a fairly thin line. And so the purpose of this is that's our minor axis to our ellipse. So no matter what direction we're facing, for all these ellipses, that's the minor axis. Okay, so now I just want to copy this object. I'm going to select, actually before we select anything, let's come over to our outliner and right click and hit new collection. And I'm going to rename this to Nurbs _2. Hit enter. Now with this layer selected, or this collection selected, I'm going to select all of the Nurbs here, Control C and Control V to paste, and I'll automatically paste that down into that collection. And now we can bring up our move tool. You'll see that transform orientations are set to global, and I'm going to turn on snapping, and we are still at increment on move. And I'm just going to move this over a couple, and now I can select this one, move it over one, so it's here, and I just want these two to touch so that they're just touching on either side of this axis here. Alright, so that looks good. And now we will come in, and because our speakers here only have one knob, we will come in and delete all of that. Okay, so that looks good. So next we've got, if I come in here, we have a sphere here that's in the wrong place. So I'm just going to move it over one. And I'm going to create a new collection for the spheres. So I'm going to come up here, right click, new collection, title it Nurbs Spheres, and just drop that down into that. And now with that collection activated, I'll select that sphere, Control C, Control V, and move it over into position. Just a quick note, to get these spheres to be transparent, we can come up into that viewport shading overlay and just turn X-ray all the way down, like so. Okay, the next step is to get this second one to rotate. As we can see from our reference, it's turned at an angle. So I'm going to hide the outer spheres there. If we just drag select this, you'll notice we want to click first, make sure that Nurbs 2 collection is active, and then we can join here and turn that into a single object. Looks like I'm missing one, so I'm going to grab this as well, this, join. Okay, so that looks good, but when we come here, you'll notice that our origin is not set at the center of the object, and so we'll need that, otherwise our rotation will get out of whack. Okay, so to do that, there's a couple different ways. Normally you could come in here and go to Object, set Origin to geometry, but as you can see, that still doesn't get us at the center of this axis. So this is a case where we'll need the 3D cursor, which is here. I'm going to open up the end panel and go to View, and I'm just going to move that over 1, basically right to there. I think should be the X. So -1. And now I can select this object and go to Set Origin to 3D Cursor. And you can see when I bring up the Move tool, now it's set there. I'm going to go ahead and hide this panel, go to Rotate, and just rotate on that Z there, just a little bit. Let's bring up our Nurbs spheres and use our reference here. If I come in here, expand this, you can see the cut line gets cut off just a little bit right in here behind this object. So we'll use that as sort of a reference on how much we should turn this thing. But we need to make sure that our camera is kind of in line as well. So I think that's roughly good right there. We just want some variation on where these objects are facing. Okay, so we're good as far as that object goes. I can turn off the 3D cursor, and now I can start setting up for carrying all of our line work over to our photo editing package, whether you're using Photoshop, Affinity Photo, or GIMP, etc. So first what I'm going to do is come into our World tab, and then under Viewport Display, just make sure this is set to white. And then when we go over to our overlay here, we can set our background to world, and then that'll create sort of our white paper look. And you'll see Viewport Display, that color is how you change that. Just make sure once again that that's set to white. And then the other thing I want to do is turn off our grid and these axes. So I can do that in the overlays here, viewport overlays, and just turn off floor and turn off that X and Y axes. Okay, now we need to set up our camera. So I'm going to go kind of in here and just sort of get a position that's congruent with our reference photo. So when you look at this, you can see we are kind of in the middle as far as our horizon goes. So we're not really super far below the object, nor are we really on top of the object, but I think if anything we are just a little bit below it, because we can see a little bit more of the bottom than the top. So I'm just going to come in here and just kind of do something like that. I want to angle this a little bit more. We can see a little bit of that face, so I'll use that as sort of my reference here. So something like that. And then I want to create, let me rotate it a little bit more. I want to create a camera from this view. So I'm just hit spacebar, cam to view. So that does that. And just, if I go over to cam tools and lock camera to view. So I'm going to go over into the outliner and make sure camera is turned on here. And And now I can just move around and you'll see that it's moving the camera. And I'll use my reference image. Get something like that. Now if I uncheck this, I can lock. So I have the camera selected. I can see in the channel mixer here all of its location, which you can see under item as well. So if you want to match that location of your camera to where I have mine at, and this is the readout, which is displayed here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and lock that camera. So with that button I was able to lock all of those transforms. So the camera is set. One thing I should note is if we have camera selected and I come over to the camera tab here, actually if I come over to the output properties tab, you'll see our resolution. Yours might default differently than what I have. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 1080p. Okay, 1920 by 1080, it makes that. And so that should give you the same exact camera aspect ratio that I have. One other thing we want to do before we start carrying this over to Affinity Photo is come in here. I'm just going to go to my perspective view and I'm going to create a plane and scale that up. Actually, let's open up our tab here for the 3D cursor because this is where the plane is going to be created at. So I'm just going to zero that out. Okay, and now I'll create the plane. Now it's at the center. If we turn our background back to theme, we can kind of see that for now and just scale that way up. So that's gonna what that will do is cut off the bottom section of that sphere, as you can see. Okay, now I can change this back to world. Okay, and go back into the camera view, active cam. And I'm going to go ahead and save the scene. So this process of creating basically your line drawing for a three-dimensional object, these Pebble speakers, it allows us to basically have the perspective created for us, and we can change our view and whatnot. And now it's just a matter of figuring out, because some of these, like this line back here, interacts, our sphere interacts, so it's just a matter of how much you want to divvy up your outliner objects and what you want to copy and paste over to your photo package. So I'm going to just sort of close all these layers, have my plane here. I'm just going to stick my plane in my camera collection. So the Nurbs spheres I have in that collection, that's those two guys. And I'm just going to turn that layer off for now. Now if I go into Affinity Photo, hit Control R, you'll see I have a piece of paper that's 11 by 17, so that's what I'm working with for this drawing. So when I go to print, I'll be printing on 11 by 17 pieces of paper. And so now let me go ahead and hide this left side toolbar by hitting T, and I can just zoom in here, something like that. We want it to be fairly big, and now I can just take a screenshot of this. Let me hide, however, this collection so that's clean and not in our way. So I took a screenshot and I pasted it into Affinity Photo here, and here's that layer. So it's very important at this step that I do not move this layer or change its size yet, because I want to paste over the other layers and have them land exactly on top in the appropriate place. So back in Blender, I will turn off Nurbs and Nurbs 2 and turn on Nurbs Sphere, and just do another screenshot for that, as well as a screenshot for the floor. So back in Affinity Photo, here are all those layers. I've got, if I zoom in, I've got the rings, and that outer Nurbs sphere, and the floor. So one thing I do, if you haven't already, is I right click and rasterize these guys in Affinity Photo. Might not be needed in Photoshop, but in this package it helps when you're cropping. So now I will come in here and just grabbing the marquee tool, make a selection somewhere about here within that white space, and I'll come up to select invert pixel selection, and now I'm just going to grab our move tool there and hit Control X to delete, and now come to our next layer with that selection still active, Control X and delete, and same for the floor. And then Control D to deselect. So now we've got those 3 layers. So I'm going to grab all 3 of those and just scale up. You can hold Shift to scale uniformly in this package. Something like that. So I think that's pretty good, maybe a little bit too big for what I'm wanting. So let me come down a little bit. And then I'm going to move it down as well. So I have, if I go to View, Snapping Manager, I have snapping enabled. And you can see there's the exact center of the page. And I want it to be a little bit lower than the center. So I'm just going to drag it down to something like this. And so that places it there. Now if I come in here and turn on that second layer, I can set it its blending option to multiply. And same with the floor layer, multiply. And I want to darken some of these lines, so this, for instance, I can create a group here. So that's in a group now, and I'm going to rename this to Nurbs Sphere. I'll rename the bottom one to Nurbs Curves. And then, of course, this guy up here is our floor. And so this I can copy and paste, and you can see it darkens our line there pretty significantly. And I can do the same here. Nurbs curve, copy, paste. Gives ourselves a darker line, especially if you set these to multiply. So that looks a lot better. So when we do an overlay on a piece of paper, we want to be able to see this coming through. So I'm going to rename that group to Nurbs Curves. And now for the floor, I'm going to create a mask layer. Come to that mask and just paint on that using black with our brush. I'm going to set the brush opacity up here to 100%. Set to black. And now I just simply paint where I don't want the floor to show up. And now the Nurbs sphere are going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit layer mask. So that's there. And so, like, for instance, up in here, I want to get rid of that. So that looks pretty good. So that floor layer got a little bit covered up. So because I have a mask, I can just come in here with white and paint back a little bit of this, or excuse me, yeah, with white. And then I can also copy it. A few times, and I'm going to grab all those guys and put it into a group named floor. So now I'll be able to see that better. I can create another mask on that. I can see I've got a little bit showing up here still. Come into black, just clean that up. And now I want to go to that main Nurbs curve, create a mask. So the first guy I'm going to get rid of is this. And then I'm going to get rid of this bottom guy here. I think that's our Nurbs sphere. So I'll come to that layer. Back on Nurbs curve, just clean this up a little bit. Okay, so that's looking better. I'm going to save that. So for the rest of this, it's just a process of figuring out what needs to show and what doesn't, and painting out on your mask layers. So this line needs to go all the way around, you know. Some of these need to go. This needs to go. Same with over here, we need this gone, this, all of this. So I'll just speed up the video and you guys can follow along. Okay, so just a little bit more of a touching up here. Somewhere I saw our little origin dot here. Get rid of that. So looks pretty good. I think I'm going to grab all of our layers and just make the whole thing just a little bit smaller. Something like that, so that because I like to put in a chord here. So once you get this how you like it, it's just a matter of making sure your line quality is dark enough so that you can see it through a page, And you'll also notice that I don't have any of these edges perfect, because we're just going to be using this as an underlay.